Chuck Olenek. I'm a reenactor. And for 36 years, I used historical reenactment to bring my class to life for my students. And I'd dress for the time period, and I'd bring in all sorts of artifacts for them to handle, and the music would be playing in the background, so there'd be a soundtrack to history. Well, I'm not in the classroom anymore. And I've decided I need to utilize all that garb that I have at home, plus the artifacts, plus that passion for bringing the past to life. And I decided that I'm taking a deep dive into California history, because that's something I really didn't get to teach due to curriculum limitations. And so here I am. And to that end, I've ended up going to each of the California missions and the assistencias that I could find, the remnants of them, and the presidios, and I would tell the tales of these places while in garb. And then while studying the missions, I came across a reference to outlaws and bandits that were hanging around in bars that were actually inside the missions themselves, which had been secularized, which to me was kind of mind-blowing in itself. However, I started thinking about, did these outlaws ever cross paths? And that just led into another rabbit hole where I just started researching the outlaws and bandidos and the lawmen that chased them. So what I've been doing lately is, I was following the trail of Procopio, who was a nephew of Joaquin Murrieta, reportedly, or reputedly, and a teammate, gang member of Tiburcio Vasquez's. And I came across the story of Dick Fellows, who made the most daring escapes but seemed to always have the worst luck. So what I'm doing right now is I'm following the trail of the outlaw known as Dick Fellows. I hope you stick with me on my journey. Soon he was up to his old tricks. By November of 1875, he was living in Caliente, where I am now, in Kern County. Today, Caliente is a pretty small place. As a matter of fact, it's got, right now, a post office. Let me turn this. There's the post office. And it's got a few residents here. But in the 1870s, this was a boom town. This was the terminus for the Southern Pacific Railway, and the line ended here until the extension would be built over the Tehachapi's. Otherwise, anything that was going to come by rail and get to Los Angeles, it basically had to show up here. And then from there, it would be loaded on a stage or a wagon and taken further south. So this was a boom town. It was bustling. There were probably about 3,000 people living here, because a lot of them were involved in the railroad construction industry. And with that population of 3,000, this being a boom town, Caliente was essentially lawless. You see a bunch of unsavory individuals that are attracted to the town. You have outlaws lurking in the hills ready to rob stages, and one of those guys is going to be Dick Fellows. James Hume, special agent for Wells Fargo and Company, was in Caliente to see to the safety of the stagecoaches. And he was given a special assignment. There was $250,000 in gold that was being transported from San Jose. And what ended up happening, it was to come to Caliente. He was to ensure, along with Superintendent Brasto and Stockton Police Chief Meyer that this $250,000 in gold was going to make it to the Temple and Workman Bank in Los Angeles because they'd been suspended. They needed to get the actual gold there. So this $250,000 was brought down by train until it reached the end of the line here in Caliente. And now the gold's being loaded up. There's 3 heavy Wells Fargo heavy duty express boxes filled with gold. Each box took 2 men to lift and put in the stagecoach. And in addition to the gold, you're going to have Hume, Brastow, and Meyer riding in the coach along with a few other people. The stage depot is crowded, and so they don't want to be too obvious about this, but there's another chest that's been loaded in, which has got a couple of shotguns and a couple of rifles, and the 3 men that are supposed to deliver the gold, they all have pistols, but they're concealed. And so Brastow and Meyer ride on the inside of the stage along with the gold, and there's a couple of other people in there as well. And Hume is going to ride shotgun, and you got a couple people in what was called the dicky seat behind them, and they take off. Once they get out of town, immediately they're pulling out the rifles and they're fully loaded. So whatever was going to be transported by train down to Caliente and then loaded onto a stagecoach or a wagon, it would take about 23 hours to go from Caliente to Los Angeles, and going through Tehachapi, you could probably only travel about 3 miles per hour. So when Fellows hears of the $250,000 in gold being transported and that it's going to go by stage, he hatches a plan. He gets in touch with another old con, and they agree what they're going to do is they're going to meet about a mile outside of town and they're going to hold up the stage. Well, Fellows goes to a livery stable and he rents a horse. And he's a little bit out of town when the horse decides to throw him off. He lands on his head. How he's not killed, I don't understand. But he's lying unconscious for apparently quite a while. Wakes up, staggers back into town. By the way, the horse has already gone back to town, gone back to the stable. And pretty much the plan is off. I mean, he never meets up with his partner. His partner's not going to rob the stage alone. So that's a fail. Not to be deterred, Fellows has decided he's going to get something on that day. And what he does is he ends up stealing a horse from a livery stable, and he rides, because I guess he paid for the last one, he feels he probably didn't get his fair share, and he rides out of town and he catches a stage that's going north, and he takes the express box, which is of course really heavy, and now he's got to figure out what to do with it. There's a problem. He didn't bring any tools, so he can't open the box. And what he decides to do is he's going to load it up on this horse that he stole. Well, the horse is not having anything to do with this, and basically dumps him in the box and takes off and probably goes home. And apparently Fellows got injured. I think the box actually landed on his foot, which shows you what kind of luck he had. So now he's going to carry the box off. And he is pushing it through some bushes, and both he and the box fall into like a 12 to 18 foot drop into basically an excavation. The railroad workers were digging a tunnel. I guess it was tunnel number 5. He lands, he breaks his leg right above the ankle, and apparently the box landed on his foot again, so he's just not having a good time. So now he's going to try to crawl off, and he's taking the box with him because, oh no, after all this work, he's not giving it up. And he goes into a rail workers camp, gets a hold of an axe or some tools, opens up the box. There's $1,800 there. But he's got his broken ankle and his smashed foot, and he's not having a good time. Now, it had been a couple of days between the stagecoach holdup and when he finally got to that railroad camp and broke into the chest. So he's already in agony, and he's hobbling around on crutches that he'd made. And now, by night, he sneaks onto the farm of Sam Fontaine, and he steals a horse and a saddle, and he takes off. Well, in the morning, Fontaine goes into his barn, sees what's missing. He reports it to Kern County Deputy Muhurin, and they track Fellows down because it's so easy. The horse has 3 horseshoes, and then there was a mule shoe that got put on one hoof. So this left a very distinctive trail, and he was found. Okay. And Fellows thinks, oh, they're busting me for the holdup. Here's the money. No, they didn't know anything about the holdup. They were after him for the stolen horse. So now he's taken and he's locked up in Bakersfield. Fellows gets locked up in Bakersfield because the county seat had been moved from Havila to Bakersfield. The new courthouse and the new jail are under construction, so they basically put Fellows in a 10 or 12 foot square wooden building. Well, he and a couple of the other guys that are locked up with him, they take apart a bucket, they use the metal framing for it, they make a saw, they saw their way through the planks, and they escape. And Fellows head south. Upon Fellows' escape from Bakersfield, the sheriff immediately offers a $300 reward for his capture and his return. And of course, the Wells Fargo and Company, they hear about this, they throw in another $200. Well, eventually the reward gets up to $800 for their capture. He's tired, he's footsore. He sees a farm come morning, and it belongs to the Cox family, and Mr. Cox has left for the day to go about his business, and he ends up approaching the farmhouse, and because he is such a smooth talker and he's got this great demeanor about him, he ends up convincing Mrs. Cox that she wants to feed him. And that's great. Except that a couple of the farm workers are looking at him going, hey, wait a minute. We've seen wanted posters for this guy. And they talk to their supervisor, and the 3 of them go confront Fellows, who's chowing down on a really elaborate breakfast. And it's like, okay, come with us. So now basically they're going to be in line to get the reward money. He then made yet another successful jailbreak, only to be recaptured. He was soon on his way back to San Quentin to serve an 8-year sentence. Again, he was the model of good behavior, writing a series of letters from his cell swearing to live an honest life, and, should he ever steal again, to take only from Affluent Corporations. Released on May 16, 1881, he went to Santa Cruz and got employment as a solicitor for the Daily Echo, in which he advertised as a teacher of the Spanish language, but failing to get a class, left the paper in the town. Again, the money was inadequate for Fellowes' tastes, and he returned to robbing stages. Within 2 months of his release, he robbed a stage from San Luis Obispo to Soledad, getting from the express box only $10. So, once again, I'm using the old Monterey jail as a stand-in for every jail that's going to somehow involve Dick Fellowes. Think about this. He has declared war on the stage lines, and he's made a number of attempts, and some are successful. And this is going to be freaking out the owners of the various stage lines, and they are putting up $800 rewards and wanted posters all over every tree and fence post all over California. And he's rampaging from Santa Barbara and Kern counties up to the Russian River, which, by the way, he held up a stage, stole an express box, and there was no money in it, there was no gold in it, there was only a letter, and the letter was in Chinese. All right, so his luck is still kind of not going so good. He's going to have an attempted holdup of a stage in Los Alamos. Okay, that's a fail. A few days later, he gets one that's successful, takes the stage driver's gold watch, which is unfortunate because he's keeping it, and he gets caught with it in San Jose. Well, in San Jose, he's caught, they lock him up, and he escapes. And he keeps doing this sort of thing. Think about this. Fellowes has declared war on the stage lines. He's robbing stages. This is going to attract the attention of Jim Hume, who had transported the gold to Los Angeles, and he's a special investigator for Wells Fargo. And Hume is going to put Charles All on the case. So All is going to be pursuing Fellowes with a posse. He's following the trail. Remember the name Charles All. He's going to be showing up later. Well, now his notoriety is really growing, and I guess his pride is growing with it. And there was a case in Bakersfield where he robbed a stage, and I guess as he's robbing it, he said, "Hey, tell your grandkids you got robbed by Dick Fellowes." And it was essentially a come and get me. Well, a posse did come for him, and as he's riding away, his horse's leg goes into a gopher hole, breaks, he gets caught. He's transported to Santa Barbara, and he's put on trial, and he's convicted, and this is in like March of 1882. 3 days after he's convicted, he overpowers his deputy, grabs his gun, runs out of the jail, runs down an alley, and he sees a horse. He jumps on it bareback, and it's kind of unfortunate for him because the horse was recovering from having eaten loco weed, and so this ride lasts about 50 yards. And armed citizens surround Fellowes. Deputy shows up. He hands back the gun, walks quietly in, to be locked up, sits down, smokes a cigarette, and one of the local papers described him as being as cool as a cucumber on ice about it. So when I told you to remember Special Agent for Wells Fargo Company, Charles All, here's why. When Dick Fellowes gets locked up, This time he's not going to San Quentin, he's going to the newer prison, Folsom. And what ends up happening is all becomes the warden. All right? So, over time, he begins to see that Fellows is just trying to do his time quietly. He wants no trouble, but he's going to be in for quite a few years. But there's no special dispensation for, good behavior and all that stuff. Besides, he's run that scam before. But what all ends up doing is he notices that calming effect that Fellows seems to be having on other inmates. So he decides to lock up another real violent criminal named Chris Evans and puts the two of them in the same cell. And what ends up happening is these guys get along great. They both like to talk. They both like to read. They both like to write. And things are starting to mellow out. And eventually what ends up happening is when a movement starts to get Fellows to be released from prison, All is one of the people who is on board with it. So is Jim Hume. Dick Fellows was pardoned on March 8, 1908. While serving his time, Dick Fellows, long known for his smooth-spoken, articulate manner, had worked as a teacher in the Department of Moral Instruction. While in jail, he received more than 700 visitors. Eventually released from prison, he visited Santa Barbara one last time in 1915. After that, Dick Fellows disappeared, and his ultimate whereabouts remain a mystery. Okay, that's the story of Dick Fellows, at least the short YouTube version. I hope you stick with me as I track down other pieces of California history and hopefully other bandidos and outlaws.